new app to go live on multiple platforms at the same time. There's a lot to say. There's a lot going on. It's almost impossible to keep track of it all and to really, be able to speak to everything that's happening on a multifaceted movement that's happening all the way from the micro of my own family out to the macro of the global stage. I'm going to start with inspiration from a share that I saw earlier by someone I consider a friend in my network. And he said something like, I haven't wanted to comment on what's happening politically, but I'm going to say something. And my first response to that is that what is happening right now is no longer in the realm of politics. What's happening in the United States right now is an issue of human rights. It's an issue of your safety, my safety, our collective reality. What's happening now is the dissolution of democracy as the United States has professed to practice it. Anyone that has been paying attention or unlearned what they taught you in school or is from Black or brown culture knows that the illusion that the United States professes to offer to everyone equally of democracy and equal rights has had major flaws the whole time. What's happening right now on the national stage is that it's starting to reach and impact well-meaning, generally law-abiding, educated professional class of European descendant white body people. And that is not shockingly generating a new kind of reaction that took a lot more effort to get people to see what was happening when it was happening to other communities of color. So those of us that were out in Standing Rock, North Dakota in 2016, 10 years ago now, we experienced, and I'm sure people before that, but I can only speak to my life journey, and we experienced this kind of militarized police forces. We experienced the kind of psychological operations designed to stoke a culture of fear. We were exposed to a lot of the less than lethal, but still damaging type of weaponry that is used against any population that is resisting the power and authorities. Of course, this happened during civil rights. This happened during women's suffrage movement. This happened during the Civil War. There's been a lot of this is an old story that the power in charge, even if it professes to allow things like the First Amendment, allowing people to express their disagreement with authority, it's always been a tenuous line between who is allowed to resist it and how much before the violence of the system is unleashed upon them. And then this chess type move where they say, if you respond with any violence, then we will deem you a criminal and unleash even more violence, which is now justified in the eyes of the law against you. But all of the levels of macro top-down level violence, like forcing people into poverty, like making prisons for profit and healthcare for profit, which is in many ways also a form of violence exerted across the populace, that is not termed violence because it is legal. Anyone that has followed the reality of history knows that legality does not equal morality. And that is something that we are also reaching like the upper limit of that narrative that, that this can actually be resolved according to the laws. I thought of this analogy where it's kind of like you're playing a game, you're playing a soccer game, you're playing a board game against someone, and there's like agreed upon rules in how you play the game. And as soon as someone starts cheating, right? Like you're playing a soccer game and they pick up the ball with their hands and throw it in the goal and say, I'm winning. You can't play the same way anymore. Like usually that's the end of the game because you're realizing like, hey, you're not following by the agreed upon rules. And that is the level that we're at in this so-called democracy right now. And again, I don't want to always have to correct myself and say, okay, I don't mean like anyone of different cultures and color know that the United States project of legality has been biased towards white-bodied European descendant people and against people with other cultures and different skin tone and phenotypes. But right now it is like escalating to a level at which it is that poem comes to mind, that harm of like, first they came for them and I didn't speak up. Then they came for them, they didn't speak up. Now we are reaching that point where everyone is being impacted. And we need as many people as possible to start activating in whatever way that looks like for you. Going to frontline protests is one of many ways to make an impact, and we absolutely need to have that. But I don't want people to fall into the fallacy that being an activist means you go out with a sign on the front line or you are not an activist. I am trying to put a call out to everyone in my network, in my proximity, that the point of being silent and neutral because you don't do politics is over. I mean, the lines have been crossed, and every single person needs to take action now because you will not be protected by your silence. You will not be protected by your good behavior. You will not be protected by, following the authority and listening to what they want you to do because the authority continues to violate human rights. They are now violating at least 4 different amendments of the United States Constitution. This is no longer a situation of politics, of left versus right, but you're playing by the same rules. No, what we are up against right now is a cult of personality. What we're up against right now is an authoritarian regime. And people have been so indoctrinated into the belief systems of MAGA that they are not all beyond logical reasoning, but they are existing in an echo chamber and a bubble that is quite literally inviting them to deny what their eyes and their ears are seeing when we look at these videos. That is what was written about by George Orwell in 1984. They said 2 plus 2 equals 5, and they want you to believe that. So if they tell you that what you've seen on a video circulating online is not what happened, a lot of the people are now going to believe that. And the thing is, human nature has a tendency to fall into these kind of fallacies. I have existed myself in what I term a mini cult, which is an abusive relationship. This is a 2-person authoritarian regime where that person tells you, hey, this didn't happen. And they will double down and argue, go so far as committing violence to defend the story that they tell you is true, even though you know with your own eyes and your own memory that that is not what happened. And it is so influential that it can cause you to doubt your own perception of reality. That's where the term gaslighting comes from. A light goes on and the person says, no, it didn't. And so I don't want you to take the mental shortcut of just throwing out that all those people are crazy. Okay. They have been intentionally curated and directed and indoctrinated into a belief system that serves some part of their psyche. And that is because we as humans tend to fall into groups of us versus them. And it serves you. Like, just think about kids on a playground and there might be a bully, right? And the bully is targeting one person. And if you stand up to that bully is going to come for you too. So most of the time, the other kids avoid the one that is the target. And the bully keeps beating up that other kid until and unless a lot of the other kids stand up to the bully collectively. So but if you, yeah, so the problem is some of these MAGA people, they know that if they were to start going against their authoritarian, fighting back against the information that's offered to them as truth, they will become targets themselves. And what we're seeing happen is that the so-called professed targets, right, migrants, worst of the worst criminals, we can now see are not the only victims of this authoritarian violence and regime. And again, that is not okay. Criminals do not deserve to be shot on the street. That's why we have due process. That's why we have the laws and the Constitution, because these need to be followed. And what's happening now is they're trying to force everyone into these like belief systems of us versus them, good versus bad. And that is very dangerous. Sorry, there's like so much I want to say, and I've just been sitting on everything that's happened since yesterday, and it's really hard to know how to cover it all. I'm also like going live, and I haven't gone live in a long time across different platforms at the same time, but I just feel like I have to say something because I'm not in a situation right now where I can go out on the front lines, and I have an ability to like synthesize a lot of information and consume it and try to explain it to people in a way that makes sense to them. But I'm a little overthinking it a little bit, and I have my notes here, which I don't even usually have. But I just want to point out, okay, so I've been saying last week that I think it's important not to cut off everyone in your network that you already have a relationship to that might be believing MAGA. That does not mean that I think that that is the best use of your time. And that does not mean that I think that every single person should be doing that. For example, I don't have anyone in my network that is MAGA. None, no one, not one person that is directly connected to me that is in that cult of personality. However, If I did have them, I would keep pumping my news feed full of information and facts that they are not seeing, that they are not privy to. I've seen some people push back on that and say, well, if they've seen everything that's going on and they're still going to believe that, then they're a lost cause and I'm going to delete them. They are not seeing what you're seeing. They are being corralled into this echo chamber of lies and fake media. It's like with an abusive person where, a new person meets them and their previous community that they've abused is like, hey, you should stay away from this person. They are a dangerous abuser. Most likely, very often, that person coming in from the outside says, well, I don't see that with my own eyes. I don't see their abusive behavior, so I don't believe you. And then at a certain point, when that abuse turns against them, they're like, oh my goodness, those people were right. And I didn't listen until the abuse happened to me. So I'm not saying that you go out of your way to try to convince anyone of something else, but I'm just saying don't invite them to leave your network. Instead, I would offer the fact that you have a shared content feed and put forward information about what's really happening. That's what I'm doing. I'm putting out 20 posts a day just about what is happening on the ground. I'm trying to find sources that are as close to what's happening in person, people that I trust, and not legacy media narratives, because we know that that has never been an accurate source of what's happening on the ground, and it's become more and more biased, right? For example, we know that CBS News is now completely compromised, and that is going to continue to happen. This censorship, fascism always comes through the media. So the closer that you can get your sources from people on the ground, on the front line, the better. And try to find people that you trust to continue to pump out trustworthy information. But I wanted to offer a few just points to make to the general populace. This is not a question of politics. This is a question of human rights. This is not a question of even values. This is a question of the Constitution of the United States of America, which again, Indigenous people have been here long before the United States ever existed and will be here long after it doesn't anymore. So you're not going to have everyone agree with you. That's another thing I wanted to touch on. Like, I was picturing a box with 4 squares in it. People are at different positionality in our society. And so what works for one person in one box, depending on their cultural identity, their religious identity, their gender, their age, uh, there is a role for those people. And the people in this box might have a different role. So there's no point in arguing like you should be doing it this way or you should be doing it that way, or I don't want you to be doing it this way. Everyone needs to be moving the needle in the way that they can. Everyone needs to be like pulling on a part of the string to untangle the knot from wherever you are. If you have proximity to people and you can talk to them through the narrative of Christianity, and you can say, hey, isn't this violating the principles of the religion that you follow and the people that culture idealizes and their values, then try to press on that. And what you're pushing against is cognitive dissonance. The reason that people don't like to accept all of the complexities of truth is because once you are in cognitive dissonance, it's very uncomfortable. The reason that people stay in denial is because it's easier than accepting the truth, because once you've actually accepted a truth and you are now having dissonance inside your mind, like I believe this, but this contradicts it, that forces the psyche to have to do something about it. Take the example of someone who struggles with addiction. They can be ruining their entire life through their addiction to a substance, but until and unless they admit it, they will not seek help. They will not be able to change. Those are one of the first tenets. So a lot of people would rather dismiss the truth that you are being exposed to, say that you're following fake news, say that XYZ didn't happen, say that all of the victims of the violence in this regime had it coming. That is an easier psychological stance to say than to realize, oh my goodness, the people that I believe are in charge and are in authority that I can trust are lying to my face. Just like it's hard to believe that an abusive person is lying to your face when they are telling you that their ex was crazy and that, they're going to love you right. And then everything is different this time around. And then at a certain point, it begins to dawn on you that the mask is slipping from this abuser and that you also are a victim of this abuse. It's a betrayal. It's extremely disorienting, and it makes a lot of shame, actually. It makes you feel ashamed for trusting someone that fooled you. Same thing happening with AI. There's like these AI videos going around right now that are showing someone standing up against ICE in like a very dramatic and animated way. I've seen it projected with teachers, with religious people, and they are fake. The ways you can tell they're fake is because they're Their vests say ICE. The real ones always say some kind of police. They don't just say ICE. Another way you can tell those fake videos is because the voices have like a tinny quality. This like audio is a little off. It sounds kind of like an old phone or a bad microphone. And the other way is to look at the people in the background. And sometimes like the features of their faces like glitch out. And so that's just an example of how we are being fooled. And when I first fell for that video, those kinds, I felt sheepish about it. I felt like, oh my God, like I can't believe I believed that. It's so embarrassing. And when I point out to people that these are fake, I don't mean to shame them. I'm trying to like make them know what is real and what is not. So take that example and then think about if you are part of this cult of personality that is following the president, that is following this narrative that's been carefully sculpted and provided to them. And imagine that everyone they know is in that. For that person to actually have the wherewithal to say, hey, I don't believe that any of this is real, they are going to get pushback. They're going to be ostracized. People may go on the offense, people may cut them off. So there are like psychological mechanisms why it's not so cut and dry and easy for these people to unlearn. There's an entire term for people to leave Christian cults basically called deconstruction, and it's very, again, disorienting for people to realize, wow, everything that I've been told is a lie, is not factually true. And I've worked with people that have actually left cults that they were raised in. And it's very scary to go out into the world and realize, wow, everything that I was taught about the outside world was not true. So I'm not saying that you have to go and, extend like your arms into a hug and have all this compassion for people that are in this. I just want you to not take the mental shortcut of saying they're all crazy or even that they're all hateful. Because if we decide that every single person in that belief system is hateful, and then our response is to hate them back, that is not a win, because the win is rehumanizing everyone in this picture, including the 5-year-old boy that was taken and used as bait to try to, get more of his family members out, including the people that have been murdered in the streets. We need to stay in touch with their humanity. And it's like, sadly, it's kind of easier to hate. It's easier to other. It's a mental like shortcut. It's called schema in psychology. Our minds are designed to like put everything into categories and boxes. And it takes more mental effort and complexity to actually hold the fact that this person that maybe used to be my friend is now believing this cult-like response. Like I remember with the QAnon situation, there were people, and I'm like, I don't understand how you could have shared this and this value with me, and now you are believing all these truths. But I also have seen people and experienced myself get involved with one other human being in a personal partnership and then begin acting in ways that are counter to their own character, their own values, everything they used to profess to believe in. And I work with people closely leaving these kind of abusive relationships that are like a mini cult. And they're saying, wow, I don't know what happened to me. Like, oh my gosh, I never would have done those things without the influence of this person, and largely isolation. That's again why I'm saying that if you have proximity to these people, don't actually advertise and invite them to unfriend you. At the very least, keep a type of bridge out to them and stay in communication, especially if you are not from an identity that is likely to be targeted by violence. So I'm not asking for everyone to do that or everyone to agree. It's only for the people who have proximity to that. And I just do invite everyone to try our best not to dehumanize all of the others, because that is a dangerous trap. And ultimately, I made this post the other day about this example of ants in a jar, black ants and red ants, and they're coexisting in a jar. And then someone shakes the jar and they start attacking each other. Let's get clear. And this is another point you could bring up to anyone that might think this is still politics, that who is shaking the jar? Who is at the top? Who is benefiting from this culture war? Who is benefiting from people getting into this mob mentality and then attacking the people that actually have the least power and resources in our society, which are people that have walked across countries to come here and work jobs that most American born citizens don't want to work. That is an illusion. They're putting the blame on the people at the lowest level of society because it's easy. It's easy to gang up and talk down to people that already have so little political power, access to resources, ability to influence society, in a society that has always been white supremacist since the inception of it. It was targeting the other people of another ethnicity and phenotype as less than, right? The term savages, like that is an old story of dehumanization that is layered into this country. So I also want to caution people from, doing this like pearl clutching. This isn't our country. This has always been our country. If that's new to you, if you find yourself or people in your circles saying like, I can't believe that this is happening in America, that just is an opportunity to invite them to consider that this type of oppression and violence has happened to certain subsects of the American populace since its inception. And so again, shaming and blaming people that are making that realization now, that's not going to help them join the resistance. Great, welcome, better late than never. And please check yourself in realizing that only now, when people that maybe look like you or have professions like you or are doing behavior that you yourself would do, of just like filming something in the street that's happening that's unjust and then losing your life for it, it's like a both and. One of the fallacies of the activism scene, of which I was deeply embedded for a long time, is that there can be this kind of holier than thou, like arrogance to it, right? Like, well, I know better than you, and how come you don't know all this stuff? And shame you and make you feel bad for not knowing. And I can understand that point of view. 100%. I can empathize with that. And I have held it myself and I have engaged in that behavior. And over the years, I realized that ultimately that is not inviting more people into the resistance. That is not inviting or inducing more people to join my side of things that I believe in, which is for justice for everyone. And so there's so much. Okay. And then there was another point I wanted to make. Oh, yes, because also when we think about this regime of fascism targeting the most vulnerable, because again, that's easy, right? It's like the biggest kid on the playground targeting the smallest kid on the playground. Like that bully is not they're not doing something that's really that difficult. They're picking on the smallest one, like the big puppy picking on the runt of the litter and trying to take more of their food. That does not make that big puppy more like innately more powerful or more impressive. It's actually kind of like weaker. We all can empathize more if it's the little puppy challenging the big one. It's like, wow, you got some courage, and you must have some other skills up your sleeve, or you think you're going to do that. That's kind of where we're at right now in this country, in the sense that those who have the power and authority right now and the law behind them are engaging in acts of violence. And this disorientation is unnerving for a lot of people that have been able to live all the way until this moment, engaged in the fallacy and the illusion that the good guys are in charge and that they will take care of the bad guys for us as a people. That moment is gone. It has already been gone for a lot of communities of color. And I invite you to just sit with the reality of that if that's not something that you've noticed. For a long time, certain communities of color do not call the police because the police themselves are more likely to cause more harm than bring any kind of justice to the situation. We can see that for people, for a lot of women, for example, identifying with certain kinds of physical assault that can happen and more often happens, especially to women, happens to all genders. Don't get me wrong. But when the court system usually does not hold people accountable for that kind of violence. I'm being careful with my words that I'm not censored in the algorithm, so I'm not going to say certain terms that could limit this visibility or get the post taken down. I've had feeds edited by the powers that be in the past, but I just want to point out to you like all the different ways in which the authority is not always there to save us. I'm going to call out my profession. I'm trained as a therapist. And a lot of therapists right now are needing to do a lot of deep inner reckoning with the fact that we are largely socialized to also follow the rules of this society in a very top-down narrative. And a lot of even our concept of mental wellness and illness is from a European-centric narrative that condemns and belittles a lot of other cultures for their approaches to healing and wellness and illness. And so there's a lot. And I think every profession, right? Like the person killed yesterday was a nurse. And so I see a lot of nurses being called in and called out to step up into this realm of justice. This is no longer a space for the activists to handle it. This is not a question of even like, I don't even want to use that term activism. It's like, if you believe in justice and human rights, you need to be speaking out now. Okay. I'll end with saying a few ways that you can actually get involved, because waking up to this, realizing, oh my gosh, this is really out of control and this is not okay. There's a moment and space for that emotional processing you can do. And then I would invite you to pause and say, how do I turn this into action? What can I do about this? How can I impact what's happening in tangible ways that are within 1 degree of separation or my arm's reach that I can actually make a difference? So, one of them is organizing your local community. What's happening in Minneapolis in terms of the resistance is super inspiring. The way that they are organized to have every single block coordinated virtually with communication and then coordinated with the surrounding blocks and the surrounding neighborhood so that they can immediately find out when ICE is there and then have people come out of their homes, put their bodies on the line instantly, and then also have these networks of support. So they're providing food to people that are not safe to leave their homes right now. There are, obviously donating resources. If you're someone that maybe doesn't have a lot of immigrants living where you live, you can find ways to give to your local immigrants' rights organizations, that you can give to organizations out on the ground in Minneapolis. Is there's standwithminnesota.com. But again, what's happening there is very likely to happen in other cities. So I invite you to do a little both, and don't think that sending all your resources out there is the only thing you can do, because more than likely someone within your state is also being persecuted in this same way. I'm here in the Northeast right now, and people here are being taken. And there's, increased activity. They just increased the agents in my city from 9 to 45 in the last few days. And there's rumors of certain checkpoints they're going to be setting up. And so people that are very close to me have to start considering how they might interact with folks being stopped just driving to work and going about their day. So it's like, and also if you are new to this, I invite you not to imagine that you have to reinvent the wheel. Most likely there are networks already in your area. That being said, don't be afraid. If you do a scan and you find out that there isn't really a little circle around where you stand, can you create your own link to put into like a chain of links that can connect over to communities that are more directly impacted by this regime, and start sharing resources, start giving rides, start bringing groceries, start, just like weaving this web of connectivity of the people, because more and more we have to rely on ourselves. Of course, it doesn't hurt to also call your political representatives, especially certain Republicans. There are about 23 of them that have voted in a certain way that is perpetuating the funding of this machine of ICE. Lots of people who voted last summer, last July, was a major tipping point in giving obscene amounts of money to this so-called immigration enforcement. And we all hopefully know by now that they are not going to end with targeting migrants. We know that our prisons are for profit. We know that these detention centers are for profit, and they're just going to keep finding people to put in them. You are not safe just because whatever the color of your skin or your identity or your citizenship. More than likely, they're going to expand. That is the direction that fascism goes. It starts influencing more and more and more people, right? Like what happened in Germany. Again, not using terminology to not get myself censored, but they did not come only for one population of people. There's one population that we most often associate, one ethnicity that was primarily targeted and suffered horrific violence. However, there also were other identities that were targeted. I don't know if it was before that or in tandem with that, but it's multiple different types of identities that are being targeted even now. We can see with the fact that they're trying to say that trans activists are also, I'm not going to use the terms, but they're trying to make them seem like the enemy. And so there's a lot of different identities that are being impacted, and it's only going to grow. Again, that poem, first they came for these people, then they came for them, then they came for them. And I didn't say anything because it wasn't me. And then when they came for me, there was no one left to speak out. So I want to call in/out the so-called spiritual community, the new age community that really likes to do some spiritual bypassing and love and light. Absolutely not. You want to call yourself a healer? Well, that's not all just about, sitting in a room and meditating. That's about taking action to get involved in your community, to redirect resources, to have those uncomfortable conversations with people that are thinking that has nothing to do with me. Maybe it doesn't today, but if you sit back and ignore it, it's going to come to your front door sooner or later. It's going to come to people in your network that you did not realize. There are people that voted for this regime a year and a half ago, who really genuinely believed that it was going to help their lives. And then, we're pretty surprised when someone in their family got taken. And we can, kind of be mean about it or poke fun at that, like, wow, that's so ironic that you really didn't think that this was going to happen to you and this person that you care about. But again, it happens. And if we just shame them and blame them, it's not going to work. We really have to think about how to get the most people connected against a common so-called enemy, which are the people that are committing horrible violations of human rights and committing injustice against a lot of innocent people, regardless of their identity. And so I really invite you to pull this out of this illusion that this is politics and invite people to center the fact that this is about right or wrong. This is about safety or lack of safety. This is about our constitutional rights under the amendments, and the Constitution, the First Amendment is under threat. Second Amendment is under threat. Fourth Amendment is under threat. Sixth Amendment is under threat. And I went to a lot of school and I still had to like look up and review what each of those individual ones covered. So invite people to do that. If there's a huge problem with education in this country, that a lot of people aren't even familiar with this. And then there's also this illusion I continue to run into of people saying, well, as long as you don't XYZ, then you'll be okay. That is an illusion. Some of the people that have been caught up in the violence that's happening in Minneapolis were literally just driving down the street to their home, and they were tear gassed, and they were, dragged out of their car because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. And the reality is that these places are no longer just a front line. In 2020, it was like in front of the courthouse in Portland was where all the action was happening. But now it's, in more and more places, it's happening just like in front of your grocery store. There was masked agents sighted at a grocery store near me last week, and primarily in communities of color. But that's something that you need to realize. Like, if you do not stand up now, it's going to get harder and harder to stand up. So the best thing you can do, one woman in my network, she's like, look, I have a space, like a community space. We can call them third spaces, right? So it's not your home, it's not your work, and it's somewhere that people can gather. Start just having a meeting. Like, it doesn't even have to be anyone that's a so-called activist. Say, hey, I am incensed and upset about what's happening. Please meet me in this time and this place, and let's talk together about what we can do in this community. If you can reach out to someone from an Immigrants' Right Network, which is one of the primary targeted populations, and invite them to come in and speak with that group, wonderful. If you can Zoom them in, great. But try to just start building networks of community of people around you. So I think it should go heavy on building the bridges with the people that actually want to walk across them. But I also would advise against burning the bridges to people that disagree with you. Allow that walkway to be open. Allow them to know, hey, we're here if and when you decide that you start to see things differently and you want to come and you want to stand on the side of people rather than like shaming them. Yeah, I understand the impulse. Believe me, there's people that, you want to say, I told you so. You want to say, no, you don't get to have this sandwich because you were making fun of people that were hungry. But end of the day, in the bigger picture and the scope of like looking back at history, it's centering humanity that is the most impactful. It's people that are able to see the humanity in others, things like restorative justice. You're able to say, I'm in pain and I'm not going to stoop to your same level of hatred, even though I get it. Believe me, I get it in ways I cannot say on the internet, that I understand the rage and the just like visceral primal impulse to take action against people that are harming you and your loved ones. I get that. And there may be a time and place and for certain people to engage in that. I'm not against that as a concept. I think that throughout history, it's been shown that, I'm trying to think of who said it. Is it Angela Davis who said, or Asata Shakur, they're not going to, if you will not dismantle the master's house with the master's tools. But tread carefully with that, because we do live in a militarized state of militarized country with a militarized police force, and we know that death has already come for several well-meaning people and many innocent people, and that will likely continue to happen. That's another thing to keep in mind. Most revolutions, most social movements do not happen exclusively peacefully. Even the ones that are famous from professed for being peaceful, there was a lot of people that got very injured, and most of their leaders were assassinated themselves. So don't think that we're going to just arrive to peace and justice without any kind of ripples and threats to our safety. But I also know that that is not the primary and most impactful way to do it. The best way is for the people to take care of ourselves and to show up in numbers. It's easier to be peaceful and impactful with numbers. You got 10 people trying to stop an ICE agent, it might not do much. You got 100, you might have, they might back off. You got 1,000, they're probably getting back in those cars and driving away or abandoning their cars. So that's your main friend, is trying to get numbers on your side, trying to be hyper local with an eye for also what's happening outside and learning from the people on the ground who are already doing it well. I'm here for questions. I'm going to start trying to go live more often because it's just one way that I can contribute to what's happening. I'll be doing my 20 posts a day about what's happening, what's going on. I'm going to do a post later today about different accounts that I recommend you can follow on Instagram and Facebook. And of course, yes, these are meta platforms, and they're held by sort of the bad guys as well, but we got to work with what we got for now. So I think that's enough for today. Uh, Thanks for listening.